we go. Just give it a couple of seconds. And we are live. Hi guys. I'm just going to get this shared onto a couple of pages, and then we can start. Share that to my timeline. Just to let you know, I'm sharing it to Andrew's timeline, and anybody on there will be able to see it there. And yep, just tag a few people. I really must get somebody to come and help me when this pandemic is over. There we go.
You know, sometimes it all looks really easy, but it can be more complicated, can't it?
It's a bit of a pain when you're on your own, to be honest. I got a girl that comes around to help sometimes by the name of Josie. She calls herself my PA. But obviously with the pandemic and stuff, she's at home, so I'm having to do all this on my own. I must maybe employ one of the kids to do it. There we go. That's shared to your page so people can get to it from your page.
Perfect.
Hi guys, welcome to the Accidental Journalist Live and Undrugged, episode 11. This live podcast is sponsored by Armour Scaffolding and No Means City Clothing. I'll pop the links in the comments after the episode. I'm here tonight with former IPP prisoner Andrew Morris. He's kindly agreed to come on and speak to us about his life. Hi, Andrew. Thanks for coming on, mate.
No, you're very, very welcome. Thanks for inviting me. Appreciate it.
Brilliant. So can we let's just start. I like to go back to the start, back to your childhood, and you know, a little bit surrounding. So yeah, let's go back to the start.
Wow, gosh. So I grew up in Brixton in South London, and I mean, I guess most people, you know, have heard of Brixton at some stage. And you know, just to kind of give it a bit of context, one day I moved out of London. Doesn't really matter where, but when I moved to this particular area out of London, I remember saying to this lady, "Can you tell me where this particular area is?" And she said, "Why do you want to go there for? It's really rough." And I just said to her, "Well, I've got a job interview there." She said, "Where are you from?" And I said, "I grew up on the Angeltown estate in Brixton." She said, "Oh, okay, you'll be all right." And of course, I went off for this job interview and got this job. But I grew up in Brixton on an estate called Angeltown, which is still there. Quite a big estate. When I grew up there, it was, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it was very, I want to say family orientated. I don't think there was anybody on the estate that I didn't know or you know, that didn't know of me or my family. Not that we were special, different, or important, but everybody knew each other is the point I'm trying to make. And yeah, I grew up with my grandparents who were, you know, fantastic people. My grandfather was employed by London Transport for 40 years. My grandmother was in service in hotels, mostly chambermaid type stuff. She was at one particular hotel, which is in central London, still there. And she was there for probably a similar amount of time until she had to stop working to look after my grandfather, who had an operation that didn't go very well. But yeah, so I grew up, I went to school in the vicinity, very, very locally to the estate. I did the things that kids do, well, that kids used to do, because I don't think kids are doing very much at the moment. No. You know, I did the scouts and the cubs and, you know, the cadets and all that kind of stuff. And then in my sort of formative teenage years, I I got a bee in my bonnet. And the bee that I got in my bonnet was around. I had a friend of mine who had been, I'm going to say harassed. He was harassed by the police on a regular basis. And on one occasion, I stood up for him and I just said, look, what's happening, officers? And I had a really harrowing experience. And, the experience I had was that, as I say, I was like 14, 15, possibly a little bit older. And one of the things that had happened at that time is the quick cuffs that police officers now use were a new thing. And I was bundled into the back of a van. And before the training kicked in, where officers are required to tighten the cuffs so that they don't continue to dig into your skin, when I was placed on the floor of this van, the officers deliberately and willfully stepped on the cuffs so that they would dig into my skin. But what I didn't do is I didn't allow that to make me bitter. Don't get me wrong, I was angry, I was very angry. And one of the things that it did for me was I got involved in kind of campaign work. I don't campaign today for various reasons, probably come to that later. But I got into campaign work around injustices, around deaths in custody, because I had a friend who lost her brother in a police station. He, after contact with the police, he lost his life. And again, I didn't allow it to make me jaded in a way that I would have, hatred for authority or the police. Because actually, I think that there are officers that do a good job each and every day. It is genuinely a small number, albeit a number that is enough to make people quite angry at the way sometimes the police are perceived, who go around, doing what they like, quite frankly. And so, I went on a bit of a campaign. But to fast forward, one of the things that happened to me in probably, it's going to be in my kind of late teens, as I started drinking, and I didn't realize that as a result of some of the work that I was doing, which was getting on top of me, I started to drink alcoholically. And then, as with most things, I think people who know about addiction know one thing about addiction, and that is it's progressive. Yeah. And so for me, it didn't stop at alcohol. I then started smoking cannabis. I can't remember which way around. It might have been the cannabis first, but yeah, alcohol, cannabis. Ultimately, I started taking cocaine, and then the crescendo, if you like, was crack cocaine. And I was heavily addicted. This year I'm 15 years clean, sober.
Yes, well done.
And that isn't by my will, because by my will alone, I'd probably still be using. That's the truth. But I allowed myself to blame some of the experiences I'd had on my then predicament, which was that I was a fully blown alcoholic and drug addict. And yeah, it was a horrible experience, because a lot of my using was done in my area. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I found drugs and kind of all that kind of stuff in all parts of the country, whether it be in London or outside of it. But today, I'm really blessed that I don't do any of that stuff. I think the only addiction I really have now is probably coffee. I love coffee. I don't smoke anymore. Given up smoking, mostly because I associated it with smoking my drug of choice, if you like, which was crack cocaine. I remember somebody said to me once, he said, what was he was talking about drugs of choice, and he said, well, what have you got? Whatever you had was my drug of choice. For me, it really was. It was that progression from one to the other. And when I got to crack, it was almost like, this is the way forward. Obviously it's not, but yeah, that's kind of where what growing up looked like for me. Today, I'm heavily involved. I say heavily involved. I get to meetings as often as I can, even if they're just Zoom meetings, because there aren't that many face-to-face meetings. There are face-to-face meetings, there's just not that many of them. of the Alcohol Anonymous and the other fellowships associated with it. And although the members are anonymous, the fellowships are not. So I'm not saying anything that is going to surprise anybody. Why is he talking about Alcoholics Anonymous? But AA, NA, CA, all that kind of stuff. And I've made some amazing connections, and some of my best friends are in those fellowships.
Fellowships.
Say again.
I say, I've spent many years around the fellowships. It's it's a big part of my life, the 12-step program. And God. I couldn't, like you said, I couldn't do it by my own steam. I tried so many times, and for me, it took praying while off my nut on the floor in a crack house and passing out. And then I woke up. I remember praying, saying, God, if you do exist, I don't even know if you do exist, but if you do, take away this thirst, this hunger, for drugs, and for the grace of God, I haven't used it nearly 7 years, but it's a drug that does grip you. It does, I can really sort of be with you there, and the 12-step program is needed.
Yeah, and you know what? It's important because I remember when I was taken to my first ever meeting, and the first time I went to a meeting was around the year 2000, and I was in and out. I sometimes say to people, it's like the hokey cokey. I was in and out, probably shaking it all about somewhere other than the rooms, because it took me on a really weird journey. But I got clean in 2006, and I've been clean ever since. But getting honest with myself was the biggest leap that I took, just getting really honest with myself about where addiction took me. And I come from a kind of a background and upbringing of not really talking, because it's one of those things. And one of the things I start to learn about myself is it's good to have uncomfortable conversations. And I remember somebody saying to me, somebody really who's actually one of the people responsible for my recovery in some respects. He said to me, what was it? You need to get humble or you'll be humiliated. And I never got that for a while. And then eventually, years in, when I eventually opened big books and stuff, I started to see some of this stuff that he spoke about. And I thought, that's where you got it. You got it from the 12-step big book. And yeah, it's been a valuable part of my life because, as you said, I was an IPP. I got out of prison in December 2019. And, in that time, I've done quite a lot, actually. I've been really busy. I've managed to, somebody put it into perspective for me not too long ago, because they just said to me, she said to me, there's a lady I've been talking to. I've never met her. This is the bizarre thing. This lady I've been talking to from the United States. And she just said to me, Christ on a bike. That was her words. So, if there's any Christians watching this, please, I'm not, blaspheming. But she said, Christ on a bike, give yourself a break. You've only been out 5 minutes, but you've achieved so much. And she listed all of the things that we talked about. Like, 1, I've been released. But 2, I've got a job. I found... what do you call it? I found somewhere to live. I did my driving theory test, and I did my actual practical test and passed both of those. I've been, appointed to a charitable trust as a trustee, and it kind of goes on. But she listed all these things, and I'm just like, you know what? This is the important stuff about the 12 steps, because it's very easy to have no gratitude. It's really easy to think about all the things that are going wrong rather than all the things that are going really well. And that's the kind of person I've been. I mean, I am, if you leave me to it, I'm one of these people. If you tell me 5 wonderful things about myself and then 1 really horrible thing, guess what I'm going to focus on?
Yeah.
That's just who I am, But what I'm trying to do now is spin that on its head, because if I live in that stuff, then I can never really be progressive and never be positive. And I held on dearly. I mean, I mentioned about not getting bitter, and I liked not getting bitter with the police, with those experiences of yesteryear. And I liked them because when I got the IPP, somebody used this term to me. He said to me, look, don't be bitter, just get better.
Mm.
And every time I went to a meeting while I was in custody, or even when I was released on day release to go to do stuff outside of prison, I would think about those words. I just think about getting better, because, you know, my whole thing about prison, and don't get me wrong, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that prison has rehabilitated me. It hasn't. I think that actually all of the work that has come from within.
Mm-hmm.
And if anything, if anyone is kind of responsible for that, it's probably the rooms. It's probably the fellowships of the anonymous programs, because there were people who came and did service week in and week out to take a meeting, which makes a difference. I mean, it's all, you can have a meeting in a, it just takes two people to make a meeting. You know this better than me, but it makes a difference when that person's come from outside of the confines of the prison that you find yourself in, because it's something to look forward to. It's stupid, but it's something to look forward to, and it's psychological. And there were loads of people I met that did service week in and week out. One of them I know, we're still friends to this day. She's been doing service in one particular prison for about 26 years. Going in and week out, holding meetings, meeting with guys, and she's got a psychology degree, and has been working with them on addiction psychology, to help them better themselves. And I'm not ashamed to say that I was one of the people that went to her and asked for a little bit of guidance. And as a result, we're still friends to this day. But yeah, I mean, I've met some amazing people, really, really amazing people.
So can we go? I know you don't want to go too far into it, but can you explain what an because I have people that follow me that don't know, won't know what an IPP prisoner is. And can you just tell me a little bit surrounding that and how you ended up there?
Yeah, hope I don't put anyone to sleep. But basically, some years ago, there was a thing called 2-strike life, and all that meant was that if you basically did the same offence or similar offence, paralleling offending behaviour, you'd be sent to prison for life. That was then repealed almost to the point where people who are still serving 2-strike life sentences are in prison 20 and 30 years later. They're still in now. What replaced it effectively, in my view, was the IPP, and IPP stands for Indeterminate Public Protection, and it was brought in by the now Lord Blunkett, who at the time was the Home Secretary, who I'm sure I'm allowed to say, I mean, I had a conversation with him recently. We had a conversation, and fundamentally he believes in the concept of IPP. He just thinks that, and I'm not putting words into anybody's mouth. This was a conversation that was articulated to me, and that is that he just thinks that some of the way that it was rolled out and the way things have gone is not the way it was anticipated. And I know that because one of the people that was sat in prison, is me. What effectively happened is people were given tariffs by judges under this thing called it was the Criminal Justice Act 2003. So the first IPP was given out in 2005, and the idea was that once you got this sentence, you wouldn't be given a date of release. So you'd be held in prison almost indefinitely until and unless the parole board deemed that it was safe for you to be released. Right. So it might be a bit strong, but I don't know if, people might have heard of internment. It's almost, in my view, it's almost tantamount to internment, because, in the 70s, even in the 80s, there were people held in jails, doesn't matter where, you can look that stuff up, held on internment, and that just meant they were held without trial. So the only difference with IPP really was that, the trial thing was there, whereas with internment, it wasn't. And so the idea would be, if you got a tariff of, say, 2 years, which is effectively what I got, you would do the minimum 2 years, but that didn't mean to say that you'd be released after those 2 years. What it meant was that in that time, you had to do offending behaviour courses to prove to the parole board that your thinking, your attitude, your behaviour had changed in some way that allowed them to say, all right, cool, we're gonna release you. The trouble with it is that very often hundreds of people would be competing for very small number of spaces on these offending behavior programs. And to give you a example, I met a guy who got a 12-month tariff. So in other words, he had to serve a minimum of 12 months in prison. But the course he had to do to prove that he was safe to be released had a 5-year waiting list. So, that puts into perspective what was happening. Now, for me, I mean, to be honest, in a way, I've been one of the lucky ones, because I'm not campaigning. I need to make that clear, because I'm in a position right now where I'm not allowed to campaign. All I'm doing is I'm telling my story, and so one of the things that happened for me was I was able to get to open prison after about, I think, 5 years. So I did about 5 years in custody, and I got to open prison. I ended up getting sent back to closed conditions, but that's another story for maybe another time. And I hold my hands up. I did something wrong. It wasn't another offence or anything like that, but I fell foul of some rules, and I got sent back to closed conditions. So that is, that is what that is. I took it on the chin. But having said that, and this is the kind of the hard part, and that is that I'm alive and I'm talking to you now, and there are a lot of people that served IPP who sadly are no longer with us. And I remember one of them that really kind of sticks in my throat, because he was my next door neighbor, he was my friend, he was a lovely young kid, younger than me, but he took his life, and I felt it coming, because I think when you're banged up for 24 hours a day, and you're kind of in the company of people. I had a single cell, but I lived on the landing with about, I think, 21 other people, and he was my next door neighbor. And so when you're in close proximity, you get used to people's habits, their behavior. You know when they're happy, you know when they're sad, and they know when to leave you alone. Most of the time, I think I had a face on me that kind of said, leave me alone. But this particular kid, I went to the authorities, and I didn't do it easily. And I said to them, look, I'm a bit concerned about him. And unfortunately, 2 weeks after going to the authorities and raising that concern, he'd taken his own life. And that sticks with me, because it was the 4th of February 2010. So it's 11 years this year, not too long ago. And the other thing about it really was that the particular prison I was in, it's probably best that I don't name it, but I was in this particular prison in the countryside, and I'd never seen this before in my life. And what happened was, there was a church service, and I used to go to the church on a regular basis. And one day the senior chaplain, she came and said to me, look, you knew him, will you speak at church on this day? And I said, yeah, of course I will. It's not a problem. And I turned up, and literally the whole jail was there, which I was not used to seeing. But more importantly, members of his family were there, and I'd never seen that before. So his mother, his grandmother, and his sister all turned up. And I wrote some notes, and it was really quite upsetting, because at the end, I wrote some notes really just so that I didn't ramble on. I wanted to just be clear and just concise and speak for as long as that I'd been asked to speak for, and it wasn't a long time. I think I spoke for about 5 minutes. And his mother came up to me at the end and said, "Can I have that? Can I have the notes?" And I said, "Of course you can." And that blew me away. But even more so, the thing that really got to me was walking in there and seeing a picture of him on the side. That really got to me, because at the time I just remember thinking, one, this could have been prevented, and two, this is one of the human costs of IPP. Those were the two thoughts that came to me. But we are where we are. It is, it's really unfortunate. So what I'm doing today is, not literally today, but today generally, is speaking truth to power as often as I possibly can, because I think it's really important that people understand. One of the conversations, this is one of the things I wanted to say, is this, because one of the things I was asked recently, somebody said to me, well, why should anybody care? about IPP and people in prison. And I said, well, just be honest with you, you know what, you're right, because at any one time, there's never more than 100,000 people in prison, which is something like 0.0001% of the population as a percentage. But what I then said was, well, reoffending in this country costs the economy something like £10.8 billion. Now, if you put that into perspective, you know, that £10.8 billion could be keeping open, you know, a youth centre that means that some kids are not going on that journey of criminality that affects people who are paying into that, you know, into that that kind of economic hole, because it's a black hole that could be, in my view, spent more wisely. I think that, you know, prior to 1993, the population of prison was half the number that it is now. So I guess you got to ask yourself, you know, what's changed. But the other thing, and I met this guy, Danny, lovely guy. He's from Congo, and he said to me, well, sorry, no, I'm speaking about him like he's gone. What he says to me, and he is a lovely guy, you know, present tense rather than the past tense, is he said to me, one of the things that is interesting is to look at how a country treats its prisoners. Then you kind of get a sense. And the thing is, if you look at things, you know, I've been blessed with the opportunity to speak to people like Raphael Rowe, who has taken up the mantle with this Netflix series called World's Toughest Prisons. And if you see some of the prisons that he's been to and the way those prisoners are treated, you just think, well, why don't we treat ours better so that we can bring reoffending down? Yeah. Why don't we, you know, kind of do things that are a little bit more radical to give people the hope? And, you know, there's a recent report that's come out of the Prison Reform Trust called No Hope, No Future, no, I can't remember, there's a third no. You know, you just think to yourself, well, why? You know, why is coming out of prison, trying to do the right thing made so difficult?
It's about numbers, isn't it? It's about how many heads are in there and how much funding they're getting, how many criteria they're meeting because they get paid on criteria. I was speaking about this with Ray Bishop the other week, you know, and it's like the ones that need to get into education, that really need education, they're not getting it because the ones that are going in there and then getting into education because they can hit a degree, which is hitting targets. And it's all about money. And I think it's obtuse and horrible, mate.
It is. And you know what's sad? I mean, I was telling somebody not too long ago, you know, not to kind of impugn anybody, but I had very few targets when I was in open prison. I had 3 targets. One was to get employment, to get a driving license, and to potentially return to university and, you know, kind of combine work with education. And I wasn't able to achieve any of those goals, sadly. But you know, when I was released back into the community, I was able to do the driving, like all that kind of stuff was relatively easy. But I just question myself sometimes about what the purpose of open prison is, because I was under the misapprehension, for me, you know, it may work for some people, but, you know, for me, it's a misapprehension. And that is that it can and does help you to reintegrate into the community. And I'm not convinced that it does. You know, I've got to be honest, I'm not convinced that it does.
No, me neither.
But one of the things, you know, I really do want to pay, you know, kind of homage to people like Donna Mooney, who I've never met, but I've spoken to on a couple of occasions by text and on the phone. And I won't get into it, but obviously her story is her story. But, you know, she's lost somebody, her brother, who was an IPP. But she's doing some fantastic work. And I think it's really important to know, really, that, you know, there are lots of people doing IPP that are in custody that may not be in touch with people like the Donners and all these organizations out here that really do appreciate, because I've spoken to them, you know, I've met them, the ones that are like, what they're doing, you know, they're protesting for us. And I'm like, yes, that's what they're doing, because some of these guys won't admit to you that they can't read and write, you know, and that although they look forward to the copy of the Inside Time, they've never read a word of it because they can't read, you know. It's that kind of stuff. So when you articulate some stuff to people, they're like, oh, wow, you know, that's really, you know, that's important stuff. And Yeah, I just really rate people like that, because I think I had times. Yeah, let's be honest. I mean, I had some really dark times at times when I thought that I would not walk out of a prison gate. I thought that I would leave in a box, or worse yet, not leave. I mean, I don't know how that stuff. I mean, these days I don't think they bury prisoners in prisons, but I had visions that I wouldn't leave. I think Tupac said visions of leaving here in a hearse. I think was what he said, and that's kind of how I felt for a long time, and I couldn't share that stuff because. Do you know what? This is the thing that might surprise people. There is a part of me that agrees with IPP. There's a sense in me that there are probably some offences that probably need it. Um, Maybe it's a bit too political for me to get into some of those offences, but I just felt that the offence I committed, I think that prison was inevitable.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it deserved an indeterminate sentence and whether it deserved taking 12 and a half years of my life is another matter. That's probably not. I'm obviously going to be biased in that respect, but I'll leave people to make their own judgment, really.
Yeah, I mean, my thoughts on IPP. It is a barbaric sentence. I do believe it's barbaric. For those that don't know, I believe there are still over 3,000 prisoners that are still like on IPP sentences, and this was outlawed a couple of years back.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're being, in my eyes, they're being held illegally under this sentence, which is barbaric, disproportionate in many cases. I heard the story of a young man, I can't quite remember his name, but he was put on an IPP for stealing bicycles, and he got 6 months on an IPP and is still there 15, 16 years later, because
Well,
of the mental health that it's caused him.
yeah.
He set fire to his mattress
Mm.
because it messes with
I
you.
think I know the guy. I mean, I don't personally know him, but I know the
Yeah.
case you're talking about. And do you know what? The smallest IPP I met a guy. His name was Jeff. I won't blow him up and give his surname, but lovely fellow. He got a 28-day tariff. That's the smallest tariff I've ever known of an IPP, but he got 28-day tariff. When I met him, I think he'd already done about 5 years. He, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's sad. I mean, I think that one of the things about IPP that was really frustrating was there was a period of time where the Secretary of State for Justice kept changing. So we had about five in I can't remember the time frame. I mean, less than 2 years, there were about five different secretaries of state. So there was no consistency. But the other thing was that Kenneth Clark was one of arguably the most progressive, because he's the one that abolished it. He in 2012 said, this isn't going to continue. So anybody who hasn't got an IPP will not get an IPP. I think he could have gone one further, but again, that's another matter, and it's speculative at best. But the other thing was Nick Hardwick, who was the former head of the parole board, because he started on a road of trying to really reduce the numbers, and said exactly what you'd said, which is that it's inhuman, it's inhumane, it's barbaric. I can't remember if he used the words barbaric, but he was certainly going that way. And one of the things that he was part of, I don't know if he actually did the introduction of it itself, was to change the test for release so that more people could get out. And the other thing he did, or was part of again, was paper hearings, so that people whose cases were very simple could be done on the papers. But by then, I think a lot of people were so nervous that nobody was going to agree to a paper hearing, purely because you could have a paper hearing, get a knockback, and then you have to wait another 2 years for another hearing. Whereas if you have an oral hearing and you feel that you've said everything you can possibly say and you still get knocked back, then that's another matter. But if you haven't had the opportunity to have your say, and you have a knockback on a paper hearing, then you're to blame effectively. And I think there was a case called Osborne versus Osborne and, I think they say these days rather than versus, and the Secretary of State for Justice. And Osborne, the conclusion of that was that every person doing life or, kind of life sentences could and should be given an oral hearing if they applied for one.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's effectively kind of where we're at. I mean, it is a shame that I think the thing that bugs me as well, because again, I was one of them, is the recall situation, because it might have been 2018, 19, I'm not actually sure, but 40% of those released in 2018, I believe, were recalled for something or other, even if it was, residing, and I'm not saying, because at the end of the day, rules are rules. If a rule is on your license, then really and truly you should, kind of adhere to the rules just for a short period of time, because then there comes a period of time when you're going to get more freedoms. But I think to recall somebody because they resided at a girlfriend's house for the night is a bit too much. I think recalling somebody because they've missed an appointment inadvertently, if you've deliberately, willfully missed an appointment, well, that's your business. But if you've missed an appointment because you didn't know it existed, or because you wrote it down wrong, or whatever the case may be, as long as it's not deliberate, I just think it's a bit much to be recalling people for.
Yeah. That's life license? Yes.
Yeah. See, the thing with life license as well is that it says, so one of the items on the license, it says must be of good behavior. And I'm like, well, according to whose standards? And I'm really in danger of getting political, so I won't. I'll stop myself because, because the thing is, there's lots of things that people do that we know is not good behavior. And I'm not even talking about prisoners necessarily. But yet we're going to write license conditions that says must be of good behavior. I mean, I think you have to be a bit more clear, must not do any behavior that warrants arrest. That would be a little bit more, nailing it down. But to say it must be a good behavior. I mean, if somebody was to, in the current climate, say to me, without knowing my medical background, why aren't you wearing a mask? And I get upset and I swear at them. Is that being of good behavior? Probably not. But at the same time, people don't know my medical background. They don't know whether I'm exempt or not. So, we create all these rules, and sometimes I don't think that they're thought through carefully.
Yeah, I think that when you're on life license, you are having to be almost, I won't say saint-like, but held to a higher standard than anybody else. I know Christians that, break what is breaking the law, downloading the film, speeding, jumping a red light, whatever. Nobody's perfect. We all make mistakes. That's the human condition. But what life license feels like, I'm not on life license, thank God, but life license to me feels and sounds like that you almost have to be above reproach for anything, and
it's difficult. I've got to be honest. It is difficult because you're constantly feeding. I mean, I heard this analogy from another IPP who's been out slightly longer than me recently, but he said, it's not just like treading on eggshells. It's like treading on eggshells that are on landmines, because you've got to be so careful, and like you say, you've got to be above reproach. I mean, apart from people that I know, I'm reluctant to have relationships. I'm not just talking about intimate ones, like man, woman, or whatever. I'm just reluctant to have new people around me that I don't know, because yeah, it's very complicated. It's really, really, really complicated. And all it takes really is being in the wrong place at the wrong time. So I'm just very careful. I like to plan. I like to plan what I'm doing. I have a diary. So if it's not in the diary, then it ain't happening. Is my kind of rule.
I must admit, I don't think I set boundaries. I have boundaries. I haven't been in any sort of trouble. Well, I've been nicked and that in the past few years, but I've not had any sort of convictions or anything for over 20 years. Some of that is, I won't go into. It's partly because I didn't get caught. And then, towards the end of it, so a lot of it was that actually I didn't want to lose what I'd then amassed, like with the family and stuff like that, and getting myself clean and building a new life. So I think, I hold myself to a certain standard, but I don't know if I could hold myself to the standards of a life licenser. You can't literally, if they wanted to get technical, they could go on old laws that people don't even know exist anymore, like carrying a fish through a library or putting your underpants out on a Sunday. It really is that petty.
Yeah.
And I don't think that I could live like that.
It is. It's hard. It really is hard. I mean, I think one of the things I should say. I mean, I haven't said. I work for the Ministry of Justice, so I was able to, apply for this job prior to release from open prison. I was successful, and so I've been with the Ministry of Justice now just over a year, and I work for the department I work for deals with prisons. We deal with prison and probation, and I like what I do. I think that I get an opportunity to help people. I get an opportunity, I think, sometimes to make potentially difficult situations better, but that is, with the consent and the will of those involved. So it's an ombudsman service that I work for. And my colleagues have been fantastic. They've been really good. I have been, this past week I've been off. I've had some relatively minor surgery, so I've been home. But they've been really supportive around all of that. But also, when I first started, they were really supportive of me being in the department. And yeah, so I'm kind of looking forward to getting on with that again next week. And I just mentioned that because I'm still kind of tapped into that world. I'm contacting prisons, but as an official. And I'm very objective rather than subjective about it. I think it could be easy to, feel that you're Billy Big Bollocks, if I'm allowed to say that. Well, I've said it now. And try and throw your weight around. I don't do that at all. I just contact prisons as and when appropriate, to try to make their lives easier, as well as the people that come to us with issues and complaints. Some of my colleagues investigate deaths. Others investigate, just complaints, simple complaints, from the most minor to the most complex complaints that you can imagine, use of force, that kind of thing. I've been privileged to kind of shadow some of my colleagues around investigations, and that will continue, I hope, in the next few weeks. But in a sense, I mean, see, one of the things, so to give some thanks back to working a program and fellowships, is it says in the fellowships, doesn't it, that more will be revealed. And I used to think, well, reveal it then. What does that mean? I never had a clue what that meant, and I finally started to understand it in the last few years, particularly in this last year. And that is that, if you keep doing the next right thing, things do and can come around for the better. And, in that sense that, I'm in it doesn't pay loads and loads of money, but it's legal. I have a flat, my own, well, that I rent. And so it's all those kind of little things that amount to, something a little bit bigger in the grand scheme of things. And I'm grateful really, because it is an opportunity, really, a second chance. Just to quote Raphael Rowe's podcast, "No second chance." It really is a second chance. But I say all of that, and it still, for me, doesn't take away the fact that somebody somewhere makes up some of these rules, and they have no idea the ramifications of the rules. I used to say I remember saying, I was in an open prison. I've got to tell you this story. So I was in this open prison, and there was this lady governor, and her favourite saying was that day release is a privilege, not a right. And I said to her, okay, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. I said, but however, can I ask a question? She said to me, yeah, ask what you like. And I said, do I have a right to rehabilitation? And she said, I see where you're going with that. But she refused to answer. And I said, because if I do have a right to rehabilitation, then surely having the right to, going out on day release in order to build a program to lead a better life is a right, not a privilege. It was seen like I was trying to be antagonistic or clever, and I wasn't. I was just trying to ask a question, because one of the things I said to her at the time was, there was an old thing, I don't know if you remember this, but years ago, one of the things that Pizza Hut and some of those other chains used to do is, if they offered you, so you'd ring up, order your pizza, and they'd say to you, if we don't deliver it in 30 minutes from the time that you put the phone down, you get it for free. So what I said to her is, look, if you offer me that pizza and you deliver it after 31 minutes, are you going to be surprised that I want it for free? Because it's your promotion. If you're telling me that there's an opportunity, when I first heard about open prison, or DCAT as it's called by some, I thought, wow, I literally thought, from reading biblical passages, I thought that is the land of milk and honey. It must be. And when I got there, I got to be honest, I was sorely disappointed, because none of the things I was told I could achieve were achieved. So I was a little bit sad when I left, because, as I say, one of the things for me about prison is that I think that everyone who goes in needs to have the opportunity to come out better than when they went in.
Yeah.
So if you're going to prison, and I've heard these stories, if you're going to prison and you're being released with 46 quid and a tent, you're not leaving better than when you went in.
Well, no. What do you need to get out of prison? You need a postcode. That's it. You need a postcode of somewhere where you're going. Whether you go there or not, that's another thing. You don't need proof of where you're going to be living. So you get sentenced, you do your time, and then you get put straight back into the position that you were when you got put in there. And it's all, it is a really vicious cycle. It's daunting for a man to walk out of, out of them big doors, out of them gates, with a see-through plastic bag on his shoulder. And if you are lucky enough to get a cell with a view, all you see is road, and that is it. All you see is asphalt. And there's no way back for a lot of people, and that's why you get the constant reoffending. I didn't reoffend, in certain ways, but it's there is the argument I have with people. People say, "Oh, well, I had it with a neighbour actually the other day, and he was like, "Well, you get sent to prison, and you should lose everything." And it's like, well, actually, getting sent to prison, losing your liberty, losing your freedom, that's the punishment for the crime.
Yeah.
So when you're in there, the way I see it is you shouldn't keep being punished, but you
That's right.
are.
Yeah.
And it's really difficult because, yes, here we have a right to education, we have a right to work. Education is the thing. As soon as you get in there, if you're a certain way, the first thing you want to do is education.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because all right, I learned to read and write as an adult in there, and that was good for me. But for many, they don't have that. They get in there, they can't get a place on the education, so they end up working in the kitchens. They end up cleaning, wing cleaners or whatever, and there's no help in there. You see the pharmacy queue at certain times of the day, and it's just, what have you got?
Yeah.
What have you got really? I know that now that there are chances to get like electronics in your cell, and they prefer to call it a room, and you can earn things, and you get paid for your jobs, although they're getting paid better in sweatshops, but that's not rehabilitation at all. And having seen some of Raf's stuff, like Sweden and Denmark and the progression that they're in, the way that they greet you and the way that they treat you when you walk through that door with a smile and a handshake.
Yeah.
You never get that here.
No.
You'd never get that here. Prisoners don't have the respect for the black and whites. I really do struggle not to call them screws. But they don't have respect for the prisoners.
Yeah.
So much violence, and in some cases, drugs are getting brought in by them, and things are happening. Even people like what's his name, the guy that's doing the podcast at the minute, it's Sam Samworth, who was a who was a guard, will openly admit that half the screws in there are crooked, more crooked than the prisoners. And that's not an easy thing to deal with. So you've got that stacked up against you from day one. And then it's protecting yourself from other prisoners, predators. You always get it. I couldn't imagine getting a small
It's
sentence.
sad. I mean, I could tell you stories for days, but I mean, just in hearing what you were saying then, I mean, there was one lady, black and white, who was really, really lovely. She was very, she liked to find solutions to problems. She didn't like to just dwell on the problem. And she helped people regardless of who they were, background, station, whatever, the perceived station, whether you were an orderly or not an orderly, whether you just arrived or whether you'd been there for a while, irrespective of all of that stuff. And she left the prison service after only being in it for about a year. And one day she came to me because I happened to be one of the kind of guidance orderlies. I was helping others as they arrived, induction type stuff. And she just said to me, "Oh, it was really nice to meet you." And I was like, "What do you mean?" Really nice to meet you. She said, "I'm leaving. Tomorrow's my last day." I was like, "Wow, why?" And she shared with me. She didn't have to, but she just shared with me that one of her colleagues felt that she was a bit too empathetic towards prisoners and was therefore not a good fit, and went to the governor with that information. And she just decided that she couldn't work in that environment because she came to help, and she felt that a member of her, member of the team that she was working in, making comments like that was undermining her ability to do what she'd come to do. So she went back to her previous work, and I just found that really sad. Because this is the thing. it's all about that punishment aspect of prison, isn't it? And that is the sense that, you know, prison in itself is the punishment, but yet there are those that come to meter out further punishment, which I find it really sad. I don't know what the answer is to change it, but if other countries like those that, you know, in Raf's Netflix show or anything to go by, like, you know, the Swedish ones and Norway and all those places like that, that greet you with a smile and a handshake can do that stuff, then what are we missing?
Well, yeah, exactly, because you know what our it's all psychological games. What our prison is you know, it's almost there to you know, it's there to break you, and you know, you're constantly just dehumanized and dehumanized from the minute you get, well, I mean, from the minute you come out of court and you're put into that, you know, all I can describe it as is a really small toilet like thing in the van,
Yeah.
and then you're driven to the prison. You know, you don't even see daylight, and they treat you like absolute dog shit half the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it breaks my heart because
Mm-hmm.
I do believe, and I have friends from, you know, my church background and my faith background, that you know, I have a friend that is now a chaplain, and is going to be going into certain prisons over this side of the country, you know, Norfolk and the East Midlands, and there are a lot of good people, and a lot of good people with good intentions, but they are outweighed by bureaucrats. They are outweighed by sticklers, and they are outweighed by people that actually believe that, you know, the punishment should keep on and on and on and on.
Yeah.
You know, what chance does you know, you are a testament to sort of fighting to get out and stuff like that. But what chance does you know, a young man or a young woman have
Do you know,
nowadays?
funny, I haven't put any work into it yet, but one of the things I've been having a conversation with a guy called Geffin Jones. I don't know if you've heard of Geffin.
I've heard a name, yeah.
Yeah. Um, and so, I mean, I'm not fussed whether he's, you know, he achieves it before me or if I achieve it before him. But one of the things I'd really love to do is I'd love to be the first ex-offender who governs a prison, because I'd like to be able to go back and do that, to be able to show people what is possible. Because I think that one of the things that is clear from, you know, most establishments, they're able to gauge by, because obviously, you know, whether you're released from one establishment and then recalled to another, or if you're released and then you commit another offence and go to another, doesn't matter, because you can still get a gauge of the statistics of when a prison is turning out people who are, you know, going in and resettling their lives, because you know, they're going to be the people that get released, that don't get recalled, don't commit further offences, and don't come back into the system. So by that alone, you get a gauge that whatever a particular establishment is doing, whether it be by design or default, is working. And I just think that, you know, I think the best. I'm really trying to create a job for myself here. But I do genuinely believe that the best advocates for prisoners are going to be prisoners themselves. And I think if you've not had that experience and you come at it from a place of trying to be punitive, you're not going to get the results that you need, that you require, because some people, not saying all, because, you know, I've chosen not to be bitter about it, but some people will continue to be bitter. Some people will come out. It's a bit like addiction in a way. I go back to that analogy again. I remember hearing a guy saying that he'd smoke a crack pipe in the hope that the person that he'd had a dispute or argument with was going to die. And I'm just like, well, there's an irony in that, because you're putting poison in your body, hoping that someone else is going to die. And I think that that analogy applies to prisoners, that come out and they'll be like, I'll show you. And the analogy that's going through their head is, next time I go and do whatever I go and do, it's going to be bigger and better. So that's going to make me more successful, but it's going to be criminality. And the trouble with that is obviously you end up back in the system.
Exactly. You know, I totally agree with what you just said there. You know, one of the things that I learned in the program is that unforgiveness, whether it be to our own actions or to other people, is a dangerous thing. It's a poisonous thing. And the only thing that I can compare it to is drinking poison and expecting the other person to die.
Yeah.
It ain't going to happen. But the way that we think as addicts, as people that have been in certain situations, is, I don't know how to describe it really. It's just, I suppose it's a form of self-sabotage.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we pull ourselves down. Somebody does something to us and we think, actually, you know, that we let that negative get to us. And that's where then the danger of, you know, picking up again. You know, but there for the grace of God, go, you know, just today, I don't have that. But, you know, there are so many people that do, and resentments that build and getting bitter and angry is what separates people like you and me from the institutionalized. And you know, you see it, you see the ones shuffling around, and you can see it in their eyes. They've lost hope, and that's a dangerous thing. And I think that's what they try to do to you when you get put to prison, is take away hope. Because you take away hope, you take away someone's freedom. The thing is, if you have hope, there's freedom there in your own mind. But people think that you should be locked up in your own mind as well as locked up in actuality, and that's a dangerous thing, you know, for people to think. You know,
It reminded me of when I was saying earlier on, no freedom, no future. That was it. That was the third one. No hope, no hope, no freedom, no future. Was what somebody was quoted as saying, who was on IPP to some researchers that were compiling a report, which has been named after the quote that he gave: "No hope, no freedom, no future." And it's true. It's important. You know, it's going to sound really mad, but I mean, I live a lot of my life on films, because, you know, apart from when I was doing educational stuff in prison and reading, I've watched films, documentaries or whatever. And the one that I watched rigorously and continuously was The Shawshank Redemption, because there's a bit in that where the main character gets sent to the hole or isolation or whatever you want to call it, segregation, the block, whatever. And he talks about hope. You know, that's exactly what he talks about. Well, I mean, yeah, I'm not even going to go into the whole film, but it's a brilliant film. And the way he talks about hope, I held on to that. You know, I held on to that throughout my sentence, because I think the first time I saw The Shawshank Redemption was probably about a year or so into the sentence, and I didn't see all of it because I flicked over film 4, as you do. You know, you're flicking through the free view to see what's on, and it was halfway through, and I was really gutted. But fortunately for me, it was replayed the following night, so I watched it from the beginning, and I was gripped. And then every time it came on, I watched it, because one of the things that happened for me is I saw something that I didn't see before. You know, whether it was the hope thing or, you know, just the stuff around one of the characters who gets released and then takes his own life, and then one that goes on and doesn't do that, but, and, you know, it's a powerful movie. It really is such a powerful movie. You're right. You know, hope is is, you know, it's fundamental, it's crucial. You know, without hope, you've got nothing. And it's funny because, you know, one of the things, and this is going to sound really silly, but just even silly things like canteen, ordering your canteen, there's hope that you're going to get it. There's hope that, you know, the things that you've ordered are all going to turn up that week. You know, and just living from that week to week passes the time, because, you know, I remember one time looking at kind of a period of time in my sentence, and I think I was looking forward to something that was 3 months away, and I was thinking, well, that's 12 canteens. And the 12 canteens just came and went, and all of a sudden I was like, wow. And then I did it again and again and again, and then all of a sudden I'm like 2-3 years down the road. But yeah, it's, I think one of the things that I'm doing a lot of lately, because it, you know, it says it somewhere, can't remember where, but is I've been speaking to people about not being a prisoner of the past, and being one of those people that can remember. I've got a bit of an elephant memory for things that people did to me, you know, that I found, should we say, unsavory or inappropriate. So I hold on to stuff. And so what I've started to do now is I'm able to let a lot of it go. I have been, you know, I've been able to let a lot of it go, because I'm beginning to find, you know, like you talked about self-sabotage, that if I hold on to that stuff, the only person I'm harming is me. And I don't want to do that, because actually that's no different from picking up, is it really? It's the same thing. And what I'm not going to do a day at a time is pick up, because I know where it takes me. You know, I know that. See, this is the funny thing. I mean, I remember having a bit of a disagreement with somebody. Somebody was saying to me, "Oh, but you're only clean because you're in prison." I was, well, actually, that's not true, because I was clean before I went to prison. And the reality is, if I was clean, if I was using in prison, the chances are I'd still be using now, because
So
one of the things I know about using, for me, this addict, you know, this recovering addict, this grateful recovering addict, is that if I use in small quantities, I yearn for it more. And obviously with prison, you can't get the quantities in prison that you get outside. You can get it, you can get crack and cocaine and heroin and whatever you want, but whether you get the same amount for the same kind of money, yeah, it's not going to happen, you know. So I think for me, my perception of it is that it would just perpetuate, it just lengthens the cycle of addiction, because you're believing that your tolerance is higher than it was, and it's not, because you come out of prison, all of a sudden you try and use the amounts you were using prior to prison, and one of two things is going to happen, and one of them is probably death. You know, and that's the sad you know, reality as well. Is I know people that have gone through that, people that have come out who again are not with us anymore, because there's blame on both sides, I think. You know, there's one I think of in particular who was held back and held back and held back. He wasn't allowed to go on day release. There was always a reason given for him not to go out on day release. And then when he was eventually released, because the parole board had some faith in who he had become, he went and drank and drank and drank and drank. And, you know, he didn't realize, I mean, he got alcohol poisoning. That's how much he drank, because he was just so, I guess, enamored by, you know, getting out and you know, having access and stuff, but had been held back for so long that he just, you know, raced off like a coiled spring, and tried to carry on where he left off after 18 years banged up. And it's, you know, I mean, there's got to be a balance.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's Norway or Finland. I think it might be Finland. In Finland, their population, prison population, is never more than 5,000, which I find incredible. But the other thing is that they allow their prisoners to go home at weekends, regardless of whether they're not in open conditions, but are allowed to go home at weekends, because it saves the state money.
And they're allowed to have relationships.
Yeah.
As long as they fully disclose. But that was because I watched the last series of Ralph Rose Suffolk's Prisons, and yeah, it's like, you know, they get to go out and work in boatyards and have relationships and go home for dinner just as long as they're back at night. You know, and it does. That's why they have such low reoffending rates, which is like something like 20%, whereas ours is like 80%.
Yeah.
So then you have to look at actually, our government, whatever, I'm going to get political now. Does our government want prisons to rehabilitate people? I don't think they do, because it's about, it's not just about punishment, like I said before. It's about numbers, it's about money, it's about heads on seats. People, because you're given a number, and that's it. I really do struggle with the way that prisoners are treated in this country. I've set foot in prison maybe a handful of times in the past few years to visit members of family. And it doesn't change at all. Still the same regime. And I don't know what we can do to really change people's perception of that. But I think that while people think that way, that is a way of actually controlling prisoners, because if people are not looking into it too much, not asking questions, well, like I do and like other people do, I think that they find that easier. I've been blessed to be able to speak to people like Alan Lord, who fought so hard to get basic human rights for prisoners, serving, because what people don't realize is it was only a few years ago when you were still slopping out.
Yeah.
I remember pissing into a bucket. There wasn't a shower and a toilet in there, all tucked away nice and cosily behind a curtain. It was a bucket.
Well, I mean, you say that. I mean, it was only in 2017 I was in a prison and I was slopping out. So it's not, it's still happening. I mean, I don't know. I genuinely, everywhere I go, I keep kind of raising it that, I really would love the opportunity to, even for a year, to govern the prison and show people what is possible. So everywhere I go, I say it, LinkedIn and some of these other platforms. And I've had conversations, as I say, with, people like Raf and now yourself and a couple of others. And, I keep saying it because I'm hoping that, somebody somewhere will feel, do you know what? Part of me is doing this thing. I remember a guy in the room saying to me, he said, I've given my number to literally hundreds of people in the room, safe in the knowledge that no one will use it. And I almost feel like I'll continue to say this and maybe, I'll hear from nobody. But at the same time, I'm hopeful that somebody somewhere will be like, well, what is it that you think can change? Because these are the conversations that we need to have, the real conversations. And if there is a real appetite to decrease the numbers, to to be a bit more innovative about what we do and how we do it as a people, irrespective of race and color and all that kind of stuff, then let's get on with it. And if not, then we are where we need to be effectively. A friend of mine he's a pastor, and he has this saying. I mean, I like it, but I don't necessarily agree with it. But he just says, blessed is he who asks for nothing, because he won't be disappointed. So at the moment, I'm just in this phase of asking for what I absolutely need, rather than what I just want. And I think I need to do something. I mean, I've set up it's not finished yet. We're in the middle of setting up a charity, which is going to focus on, I don't want to reinvent wheels. I really don't. But one of the things I want to do is I want to help ex-offenders, veterans, and recovering addicts, because I happen to be all three of those things. And when I was released from prison, as I say, just over about 14 months ago now, all of the help that I thought would be available to me wasn't. My local council, again, won't name them because at the moment we've got a bit of an issue going on, but they do need to be embarrassed, and that is that my local council during lockdown failed to help me. Basically, I was faced with being kicked out of a hostel. Not sure why, because we were in the height of the first lockdown, the very, very first lockdown, when everything was eerily quiet and there were no cars or people on the streets. And I was told by the local authority, they said to me, well, you have to, I had to produce my birth certificate. And I said to them, well, the copy is in your registry office. I paid for it. Perhaps you could send a copy to the department next door that requires it, and then you could send me the birth certificate. And they said, oh, no, we can't do that. You have to come and get it. And I said, well, are you prepared to vouch for me if the police stop me and ask me what my lawful business is being on the streets, when I've been told that there is a lockdown and, effectively there were only 4 reasons to come out, and that wasn't one of them. Anyway, in the end, I wrote to the leader of the council, and 2 days after that email, the birth certificate appeared in the post. And I thought, what was so difficult about that? Why could you not just see the sensible, way of working? Send, the one department is next door. You require a copy of it. Send them a copy. You've got the document. It's not like I've got it and I have to produce it to you. You're going to give it to me, but you're being really difficult about it. Now the argument we're having is that at the time they promised me by email. They said, we'll offer you a bond to help you with your housing, but very few landlords take this. So therefore, we'll offer you a reasonable cash deposit of about £800, but they never gave it to me. And I said, look, I don't care whether you give it to me or the landlord. I'm not fussed, because it's going to go towards the rent, 100%. Their issue was that I then got some funding from from the Royal British Legion. Not going to make a secret about it, from the Royal British Legion, based on my former service. And they were like, well, you're housed now. And I said, but that doesn't excuse your duty. You haven't helped me. So if I hadn't done any service with the military, reserve, or whatever, then what would I be doing? I'd still be, effectively pissing in the wind, waiting for you to produce a deposit. The fact that I'm in gainful employment is neither here nor there, because I'd only literally just come out of prison. So I was saving up and trying to get used to new stuff. So we're having a bit of a Barney at the moment. We're having a bit of a disagreement, because I'm saying to them, you've lost me earnings because I was doing some part-time work as well. You've messed that up, and you didn't produce the deposit. And I just think that that's unforgivable, really. It's really unforgivable. So we're going to resolve that through the legal route. But they had the cheek to say to me, well, you've committed to litigation. And I said, well, you haven't given me any option. I didn't have any alternative. You weren't saying, let's have a discussion about how we can resolve this, and maybe we'll settle it and we'll give you this much. You haven't said that. So there was no other option except to commit to litigation. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at. And the point I was going to make about the charity is that, so it's called the New Wave Trust. And I've got some really good people that are going to be involved in what we're doing, and effectively we're just going to try and sew up some of those, some of the, because we can't do everything, but the voluntary sector, I think, plugs a lot of gaps in provision.
Yes, yeah, it does.
And so if we can just, even if we can help 2 or 3 people, then we've had the right result in my view. And I think that one of the things that is often missed, when I was in some of these prisons, what would happen is some people were fearful of being named as ex-servicemen for various reasons. Not least because, some prisons, there are extremist elements, and some people were fearful of that. They were very vocal that they were afraid to be named because they didn't want to be targeted. But that said, one of the other things that would happen, the reverse of that, was that some officers would be tasked with finding out who the ex-vets were so that they could be put in touch with some of the charities that could help them. And, so I was put in touch with, the RBL, Care After Combat, all of these people, SAFA, to see what they could do. And Care After Combat, I've got to be honest, their guy has been fantastic. He's stayed in contact even now. He constantly, sends emails or messages to say, how are you getting on? Is there anything that you kind of need, whether that be making an application or just a listening ear? He's been fantastic. I've got to be, I can't big him up enough, to be honest. SAFA, I haven't had much contact with them, but again, they've been fantastic when I have had contact with them. And RBL, wow, I've got to be honest as well, they have been awesome, because if it wasn't for them, I probably would be homeless, because they helped me with there was a lady who's no longer with them, sadly, but she's moved on to another post with another organization. But when I was in touch with this lady, Tammy, she was fantastic. She just helped sort everything out, get it all kind of lined up, payment made, and tenancy agreement done, all that kind of stuff. So it lifted a lot off of my shoulders, which was fantastic. There was a lot on my shoulders, but it's basically because of them that I am, I'm under a roof, talking to you from under a roof instead of the roof of a tent or something. All right, that's probably a bit too extreme, but yeah.
I don't think it's that extreme, to be honest. I can relate to the fact that I was homeless for over 2 years. And when my first marriage broke down, and I went to the council for help, and I will name them, Norwich City Council. Shame on you. You don't do anything for a lot of people. That they offered me a sleeping bag.
Wow.
They didn't offer me any help. And because I had left my home willingly, I intentionally made myself homeless, so they wouldn't help. And that was the start of a massive vicious cycle. I know people that have died on the streets due to the negligence of not just Norwich City Council, but councils all over the country. I almost died on the streets. It's not good. It's bureaucracy, mate, and like you say about passing on birth certificates and stuff like that. I think you'll find that most people that are homeless don't have access to birth certificates, don't have access to anything. If you don't have an address, you can't get benefits.
Yeah.
You can't sign on, which means if you can't get benefits, you ain't going to get a house. And if they do offer you an alternative to put you into a hostel, for men like me and you, that's dangerous. Because there are so many drugs in there. There's so many villains in there. It's just impossible to stay away from that. So most people would rather be on the street. And yes, I was lucky in the fact that I managed to find sofas to stay on some nights, and the kindness of people who gave me meals, and I was blessed to be able to have somewhere to stay, a sofa to stay on at the weekend for a while, and my daughter was allowed there as well, so I could see my daughter for the weekend and still have my daughter for the weekend back in the early days. But there are so many people that have lost their lives due to the bureaucracy and negligence of councils, because they don't understand, they don't want to understand, and it's about numbers again, and it's about funding, and that really does break my heart. And that's one of the things that I have a heart for homeless. I have a heart for ex-criminals that trying to sort themselves out. And yes, a few of us have been fooled by a few people that have said that the were one thing and they've actually been another thing, and that wolf in sheep's clothing. But I think most of them, I mention them week after week after week, people like Terry Ellis, Ray Bishop, who's one of the sponsors, one of my personal sponsors, Joey Barnett, all these people are standing up for prisoners when other people won't. And I will give this platform to people like you and them, because I always said, if I could read and write, I'd be dangerous. And I learned to read and write, and the second book, and then I started doing these to help me with my confidence. So I'm not the most confident speaker, and I could write it down, but I couldn't get it out. Whereas before, I could read and write, I could speak it, but I couldn't get it out. And the thing about getting sober for me was that I lost some of that ability. So I'm trying to build that back up. But I will always give this platform to people who need a voice. Because if you're in prison, you haven't got a voice, you can't vote, you can't, what can you do? You can speak to people like, Razor Smith. And do the Inside Times maybe, if you can read it. You can speak to a listener who's in the same predicament that you are. But it's I do have heart. You got men like, I don't know if you know Paul Bogey.
Well, I know Terry Ellis, and one thing I will say about Terry is, I mean, we were away together in open prison, and even before he was released, he was giving voice to the voiceless. And I remember one day seeing him speaking to a governor, and it was funny because this particular governor, he liked to deflect, I felt. And he didn't have any answers for what Terry was saying, because everything Terry was saying was spot on. And I've got to be honest, I've said to Terry a couple of times since I've been home, because we haven't managed to meet up since I've been home. I've been saying to him, mate, you're making me feel like I'm standing still, because I keep seeing all the work that he's doing. And I just feel, I mean, he's released 2 or 3 books. I think he's got 2 books that he's written himself, one that he's kind of contributed to. Scoff Meals, the stuff that they're doing for vulnerable and homeless people, and I think he's awesome. I really do. And this is what we need. This is the stuff that we need. And I think that with prisons, I think there are some. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. Maybe it's my stuff. But I think that there are some prison staff or governors that will see stuff like that and be really agitated, irritated, or annoyed, when actually they should be jubilant and happy and excited, because it's people doing the work that he's doing that's actually going to stop more people from coming to prison. I think.
He's educating. He's using a platform like Facebook. I've been trying to do this for a little while, but he's using Facebook to educate people that wouldn't necessarily know about this life. A lot of my followers don't know about this life, which is why I decided to start getting on ex-criminals and start talking a bit about my past and getting other people talking about their past, because I believe education is pivotal, because then if you're educated, ignorance is then a choice. I've been ignorant to certain things in the past, and then I've been educated on it, and then I could no longer be ignorant. Or if I was ignorant, It was through my own belligerence. It was through my own failings as a person.
Yeah.
And then that's my responsibility. Whereas if the education isn't there, then you can't really say it's your responsibility. You can want to go out but you can't make people go out and learn. There are a lot, no doubt there are prisoners in there that are just skating through the sentence. They're not bothered about anything. I know people that are institutionalized. I know people that actually quite like it deep down. And I know people that would actually struggle on the outside. So there is ignorance on every side.
Yeah.
What would you say we could do to as people to combat some of that ignorance?
Do you know what? I think until some of those things, I mean, forget me in the equation now, but until, if we're talking about prison specifically, until things change in the sense that we get to a place where it's not unusual to have somebody who's an ex-offender becoming a governor or going back and doing service other than just in maybe as a chaplain. And I'm not undermining being a chaplain. I think that stuff is really important. But we have to have people in all walks of life, I think, that have got lived experience. We have to have people that are going to bring lived experience, but also make those changes. And you know what? Ken Clark, when he started the reform of IPP, he started that. And here's a guy who, has been basically in Parliament all his life. And the man's in his 80s, I think. He's been in Parliament for about 60 or 70 years. So, his lived experience is never going to be the same as yours or mine because, he comes from what he comes from. But we just have to have people like the Terry Ellis's of the world, like yourself, like Raf, because even Raf's story. I mean, I don't know how many people know Raf's story, but he was banged up for 12 years for a crime he actually didn't commit, and as a result of that, became a journalist because he learned, he taught himself reading and writing, and came out and ended up working with and for the BBC. But I say that to say that we're never really in positions that affect change, because occasionally there may be some conversations where
Story sad as well.
it is, but occasionally there may be conversations, and those conversations may take place, but there's never a change at the end of it because we're not decision makers. We're not in that position. Sometimes people may listen to us, but are they really listening, is the question I ask. And it just, I don't know, I just think that we have to change the dynamic is what I think we need to do. We need to change the dynamic, and the way we do that is, I think, by literally, do you know what? Lockdown should have been our opportunity to have these conversations and really, create a new blueprint for a new way to live. So I think in that sense we've missed the boat. Yes, I know people have been siloed in their bunkers and come up with individual projects that might have made them a couple of quid and kept them in clothing and kept them fed and watered and what have you. But I think we've missed an opportunity really to have a bigger conversation. How long ago was it that? See, I'm getting into politics again, but I remember a conversation a certain member of Parliament was talking about kind of reforming quangos and stuff like that, and it never happened. And I think that reform needs to happen, generally speaking, because we need to kind of get a sense of what works and what needs to work better. And the only way we do that is by talking. I think that one of the best conversations I've had recently is before the lockdown. I met this lady called Paula. Paula is a manager at the Prison Reform Trust. She's also, I'm not violating anything because she'd tell you herself, she's also an ex-offender, but she's a senior manager. And when she was speaking, I got a sense, I'm thinking, is she an ex-offender? I don't know what gave me that sense. But all of my colleagues are sat there, and some of the mouths kind of dropped when she, she got 40 minutes or whatever it was into her conversation, and then literally gave the bombshell. Yes, here's a picture of me when I was banged up how many years ago in X, Y, and Z prison. We've got to let go of that stuff. I mean, it's one thing that, if somebody's committed a heinous act, and we know what the heinous acts are, there's no need for me to get into listing all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that criminality is okay. I'm not saying that. I've never said that. But if somebody commits a heinous act, we know that they need to go to prison, right? But what then happens is that the rest of us who maybe might have a light bulb moment and think, you know what, actually what I did there was a bit of a rick. It was a mistake. I shouldn't have done it. I want to get on with my life. We're disabused almost of doing that, because stuff is placed, obstacles are placed in our path that give us a sense of, all right, well, you know what, I won't do it then. It's like that kind of addiction analogy. And that's why I've given you a long-winded answer, but what I'm trying to say is we need to have the conversations. People need to make more radical decisions that kind of can put people in positions that will help to change things for the better. I think that there are organizations. I remember years ago, I don't know if you remember this, I think it was NACRA, one of these organizations, that was bidding to run an entire prison, and it never went through. Don't know why. I'm not going to guess as to the reasons, but maybe that might not have been a bad idea, because if an organization that is charitable, that is helping, the very acronym is National Association of Care and Resettlement of Offenders. If an organization based on that wants to try and do something different, even for a period of time, for a contractual period, and then fails, then you can remove them. But if they do something and they do it well, then let them carry on. But all this kind of back and forth and changing of the guard, that then means that things go back to how they were, or they get worse, or they get more draconian or less. It's just not working for anybody. It's not working. And I think that's one of the difficulties that we have, is that instead of really just having those honest conversations and changing the things that just blatantly don't work, we go along to get along, and I don't think that's enough.
No, but these are the conversations we need to be having as, I call myself the accidental journalist for a reason. I fell into this accidentally, through really getting educated on certain things and then wanting to be a voice for other people. But these are conversations that there are not a lot of people out there talking about, with the exceptions of people like Terry and Ray and Joey and, people like that. You've got the, you've got so many podcasts that are out there talking about, yes, they're ex-offenders and they're doing this and they're doing that, but they're not actually talking about how we can reform prison. Yes, we can reform ourselves when we get out, and we can work to be a better person. And a lot of that for me, and I'm sure for you, is down to the 12 steps of the anonymous programs.
Yeah.
I live by I call it the beggar's prayer of St. Peter, that you see in rooms all around the world. And I've had it pretty much in every house. I have it as a tattoo on my arm. I let somebody who wanted to be a tattooist do that. I said they could do it when they reached 30 days of clean time. And I let them know about it on my arm since. But it's a big one for me. It's the God, but in its full form, not just in the form that it's in the rooms. Because in the rooms it's God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. The rest of it is living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardship as a pathway to peace. I'll say that again, accepting hardship as a pathway to peace. living as God would have me live, and not as I would live by my own self. That for me, having to let go of old ideas, let go of old ways, let go of old beliefs, and let go and let the God of my own understanding take it, and surrender to win. I didn't understand that concept. I thought surrender was a bad thing, and it isn't. It's a good thing. And to surrender to win, and it's in every single step. God is in every single one of those steps. And that 12th one, having had a spiritual awakening, we carry the message as part of this.
I only began to accept surrender. I mean, don't get me wrong, I've always accepted surrender as part of my recovery, but when I started to get comfortable with the word surrender was when I was told that there's this kind of triangle, and in this triangle is surrender, avoidance, and overcompensation. And I realized that actually, of the three, I'd rather surrender, because if I'm avoiding, I'm doing nothing. If I'm overcompensating, I'm harming myself. So no, it makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, for me, that's just like so I always thought surrender was a bad thing, but actually, if you look at if you were in battle and you're in a bunker and you're looking over that bunker and you're outgunned and outmanned, you're not just thinking about yourself, you're thinking about your soldiers behind you and the soldiers in front of you and the men that stand beside you, and you think, okay, this is no longer about the rules of engagement. This is about the rules of actually preservation. And sometimes to surrender, to take that step back, to move back to a different vantage point is the one thing that saves your life. I've hit rock bottom so many times. I had 12 years clean and sober, and then I ended up as soon as I ended up on the street, that was it. I was back on the on and off the gear. Pain was a catalyst for me. My own pain, because I didn't know how to deal with this. I could not deal with my own mental health, so I just kept falling into it, and people kept picking me up time after time after time, and I kept letting them down that time after time after time. And because I couldn't get this surrender to win, I was always be that gung-ho and run into a run into a fight before it had even started, just to kind of so I could control it. I didn't like not being in control. But what you don't realize is that actually you're not the one in control anyway. There's always someone above you. It just happens for me. That's the God of my own understanding. And the program, it started out of a man, out of Akron, not being able to deal with the situation, so he picked up a phone book. He rang everybody in that phone book looking for another alcoholic, and this was like it was 1929, wasn't it? After the crash, and then found another alcoholic, and it wasn't really sort of known about. And then they started talking. They talked for hours, and then they went and visited someone else, and then that grew into this phenomenal set of fellowships that all have different missions, but they all have the same goal, which is to be.
I love that story. I love Dr. Bob and Bill Wilson. It's a phenomenal story, and the film. Because I live a lot of life through film, but the film of their story, James Woods and
James Garner.
James Garner is an incredible movie. You know, an
It is.
incredible movie.
It is.
And yeah, I mean, do you know what I was?
James
What
Rehab.
was I doing? I was doing something just the other day, and when somebody, it's funny when people call out these things, but somebody mentioned they. Oh, yesterday, I was at a funeral, and somebody made a reference to M. Scott Peck, and I was like, and literally before they named it, I was like, oh yeah, the road less travelled, because I'd read the book, forgotten it, to be honest with you, probably need to read it again. But you know, I have those moments of clarity again when I hear people sort of mention things, especially the things that have aided, you know, aid memoirs on the road to recovery. Because I didn't get recovery the first time. That's you know,
No.
I didn't even get it the second time. I think it was the third, you know, the third go at it. I got it in 2006, but you know, between kind of 1998 and 2006, the 8 years of my real hardcore A class addiction, or class A addiction, I should say. You know, I tried to stop a lot and just couldn't. You know, well, I could, but as I say, you know, I just couldn't stay stopped. That was the difficulty.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it was because of stuff like that. You know,
I mean,
and imagine written, you know, what is it? Not even quite 100 years yet, but not far off of it. I mean, well, what,
not far off. Yeah.
8 years time, so
Yeah.
92 years ago, and it's still working to this day.
That film in rehab.
Maybe that's what it is. Maybe there's some kind of I mean, I'm not saying we've got to write another big book, but there's something that has got to be written or gotten rid of that isn't working for the prison cycle. I think one of the things I would get rid of if I had my way is prison service instructions and prison service orders. You know, the rules that effectively govern certain things, and the reason for that is because it gets complicated. It's always through somebody else's eyes. I mean, somebody might read it and interpret it one way, and somebody interprets another. I remember interpreting it, for example, for myself, I interpreted a piece of information in there, and it was around Rule 39, which is about the sending, you know, for people that don't know, sending of legal letters to and from prison. And I got into trouble from a PO, as it was then, a principal officer. They don't exist anymore. It's now custodial managers. And then when I appealed it, it was over. My appeal was upheld based on the very same evidence that I used in front of the PO. And I was just like, well, how does that work then? Because clearly you've not interpreted the same way that the governor's interpreted it. So who's wrong? because
Exactly.
because it was held over me a bit longer than it should have done based on the same evidence. But you know, this is the thing. And the other thing is, there's a lot of it is antiquated. It's outdated. You know, like walking through a duck through a library. You know, it's that kind of law. It's that kind of rule. And I think that, you know, maybe we need to kind of, I don't know. Maybe I need to sit and think about some of this stuff.
I think we all do, to be honest. I mean, like I say, I'm a great believer in the 12-step program for anything. You know, not just addiction, but it's a great way to live anyway, because it's a good regimented. You know, I was taken to my first AA meeting at the age of 14 in 1991.
Wow.
1991. Because I was in a school for maladjusted children, because I was dyslexic and I couldn't read and write. So I was naturally lazy and had potential criminal behavior. So they would, you know, the only thing I left, the only certificates I left school with were changing a fuse in a plug, riding a 50cc moped, answering a telephone, and then the rest were so by the time I left school, I could teach abseiling, climbing, canoeing, caving, because when you were naughty, you were taken away on the army youth team, or you were taken away, you know, by one of the teachers at the weekend who'd take you climbing, caving. You know, that was a different thing. But you know, that school bred a I was bullied really badly. And a lot of the time to fit in, I would do lines behind the bike shed. You know, I came from a really good family. You know, I was adopted into a really good family in a really nice area of Yorkshire. And a lot of the kids that came to this school were all from, I wasn't from a council estate. You know, I'm not even going to lie. I was a very lucky boy, but I had things going on in my head, issues around rejection, that really sort of fueled my bad behavior. But you know, I had a really great, hard-working family who loved me very much. But I was, you know, I was an asshole, and I just grew bigger, and that was bred into the school. So, you know, I wouldn't think twice about doing a bottle of White Lightning behind the bike shed at dinner time and walking into the class and just floating through till the taxi came at home time. And that's why that's why I ended up at my first meeting at the age of 14 with DTs, taken by somebody masquerading as a friend of the family. So, you know, I've been around the program for a long, long time. And there's always that what if, you know, I'd be like 30 odd years sober coming up, you know, but I can't think like that, you know. I hit rock bottom so many times. It took me to jails, institution. I'm very nearly deaf a few years ago. You know, I've been honest about it. It's in my books. I'm honest about it on air. You know, I had a very public personal apocalypse that was a massive psychological breakdown in hospital that turned me into the person that I am today. And some of that's down to brain damage because it changed the way that my head was wired. Brain damage through hypoxia. And I do attribute it to, like I say, a lot of it to God, but what we have done in our lives. And, you know, like you said, we have to for the bad things, but we have to take responsibility for the good things that we've done. So I look at the things that I've done since I've gotten into recovery: the books, the films, the interviews. You know, and I've been blessed by some people that have really believed in me. But you know, as have you, I'm sure you'd agree. But a lot of it was fear. Of not being taken seriously because of the status that we once had. People would cross the road to get away from people like you and me at one point, certainly me anyway.
Oh, yeah.
And there are a lot of people out there that hold people like me now accountable for our actions, and I have to be accountable for everything that I say, everything that I do. You know, and I'm into giving people second chances and third chances and stuff like that. But there are people that take the mickey. But you know, it's like I believe that in the situation that we are now, you know, this pandemic is going to go on for a long time. I think we're going to be in and out of lockdown, and I think it's our responsibility to do things like this to carry the message forward, not just the message of recovery, but the message of actually hope. And I think that's what you do. It's admirable that you are really pushing, you know, your belief, your agenda, because you know, I don't think I could work for the Justice Department after, you know, after what's happened for me. You know, I've got friends that in church that are police, and I still have to dig at them because I suppose it's a part of my own journey, and I suppose it's a failing of mine, but I don't particularly trust the police. You know, and I think that that's another sort of debate for really another day. But one thing I did want to ask is that you know, you're from London, right? And you know, I wanted to ask. You know, I have a lot of black friends that you know are from that sort of area, and that are pretty much on the same journey as we are. But they say that justice for them is disproportionate in the way that they're treated. Would you say that's true?
The straightforward answer is yeah, I would. I mean, the charity that I am a trust. So obviously, there's one charity that I'm setting up, and there's a charity that I'm already a trustee of. And the charity that I'm a trustee of has been involved at the moment with trying to develop a project around stop and search, because stop and search in London disproportionately affects, and you know, the government and police statistics, not mine, you know, disproportionately affect black males, even females these days, over every other group, literally over every other group. So whether that be white or Asian or any of the other groups that you can think of. And so, yeah, the answer is yes. I don't know what that's attributed to. I mean, even in the first lockdown, 22,000 black males were stopped and searched by police for. And by the way, I mean, I'm not clear about the result of whether there was any arrests or not. What I do know, because the figure was put out there, was that 22,000 people were stopped, which was, you know, much higher than any other group again. I've been a little bit worried at times, because there was a stop and search that I witnessed myself, and I decided to hang around and just, you know, observe. And an officer approached me, and we had a conversation. And the officer, when I said to the officer, "I'm just a bit concerned about what's happening. Can you tell me what's happening?" And she said to me, "Well, we're not searching him. We're just talking to him about why he's in the area." And I said, "Why?" And she couldn't really give me an answer. She just said that, you know, we can talk to anybody. And I said, "No, I don't, you know, I don't doubt that. I'm just asking why, you know, why him? Why not me? Why not the person across the road? Why not, you know, the lady that was walking past?" And she said something that really baffled me. And she just said to me, "Well, you know, it's, she started quoting some figures. She said the figures don't lie, and that, you know, knife crime occurs between, you know, black males." And yeah, okay, that's fine. I don't completely agree with that, by the way, because actually, if you go to Scotland, most of the crime that was happening up there was an epidemic of knife crime, and it was all white youths against white youths. So, you know, I don't agree with it. But the other thing that she said, when I said to her that, you know, the figures say that black males are 9 times more likely to be stopped and searched than any other group, she didn't agree with the figure. She said, "Oh, that doesn't, I don't believe the figure." I said, "Well, why?" Because they're Home Office figures. I actually went back and confirmed the figures. It's actually 7 times, but it's still high. Yeah, it's so, but you know, to answer the question, yeah, it is the case. And again, I think it comes back to dynamics. I think dynamics need to change. I don't know what can change those dynamics, but something is in the air, something is happening that is allowing people who are in positions of authority to think that they can get away with doing whatever they like. And that needs to change. You know, that needs to change.
Yeah.
And this is one of the reasons why that, you know, in the job that I do, for example, you know, when there are opportunities, and I don't abuse them, but if there are opportunities, if I see something that is taking place that I believe to be wrong, then I'll intervene.
Good.
You know, without rhyme or reason. If it's clear that it's an injustice and it shouldn't be happening, and I will intervene by, you know, making a phone call, speaking to whoever I need to speak to. For an example, I rang a particular prison. Again, I won't and can't name it. But I rang this prison with a very serious issue that was going on. And actually, I was ringing the prison to give them an account of something that disturbed me because of a message that we had received. It was actually to do with somebody that potentially was going to take their own life. I can tell you that much. And when I rang, this person answered the phone and said, "I can't put you through." And I said, "Why not?" And he said to me, "It's lunchtime. They won't be taking any calls." I said, "But you're guessing. Can you, I gave them my credentials and I said, look, this is who I am and I need to speak to somebody now because I've just picked up the message and I'm a bit concerned and I need to do this." He refused and was very belligerent. So I said, right, okay, you know what? I'm going to talk to the governor. So I escalated and I rang the governing governor of the prison and I spoke to his office. I can't remember if I spoke to the actual governor themselves, but literally 2 or 3 minutes after that conversation, I received an email from the individual apologizing. And I just thought, well, why did we need to go there? Why did we need to go there? You'd have saved yourself an embarrassment and saved me another phone call by just doing what I was asking you to do. I wasn't soliciting information. I was effectively giving it, in order to try and help others to not come across a body in a cell or a room. And this guy was just really difficult. And so I think these are the challenges that we face. I mean, I have no doubt that, countries all around the world face the same challenges, but as we've seen, there are examples and there are examples. RAF shows them, really graphically, the shaking of the hand, the smile, the state of the accommodation, the kind of the meals, the regime, all that stuff. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I just wish I was in a position of to change things. Because it's one thing when you can kind of see it and map it out in your head, even if you can't articulate it necessarily on paper. If you can see it in your mind's eye, getting somebody else to see it is not always an easy process, especially if they're not open to listening. And the good example of that really is the death in custody I spoke about when I went to the authorities and said, look, I'm a bit concerned about this individual. And 2 weeks later, he was gone. That could have been avoided. I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't blame anybody particularly because in that example, if somebody is committed to the idea of taking their life, then they're going to do it. They're going to do it, and there's nothing you can do to stop that. However, I think that there are times when if you're given some information and it sounds like it's more than just bluster, you need to listen. Just because I'm a prisoner, it doesn't mean to say I didn't have a life before I came here.
Exactly.
And these are the things that trouble me. But as for I think one of my concerns really lately has been, I'm in danger, aren't I? I've just been a little bit worried about the whole stop and search thing, the whole kind of the mask wearing thing. I'm actually exempt, but do you know what? For the sake of going into Sainsbury's and not getting into any drama with anybody, I'll wear it because I walk with a list, so I know exactly what I want. I know where I'm going. I'll zip, 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 in and out. End of story. I'd rather not wear one because it is a bit kind of stifling. I'm asthmatic and I've got high blood pressure and all kinds of stuff going on. But yeah, so I am exempt. I don't have to wear one, but I just find that it's easier not to get into issues. And I just think it's a shame that we're there. I think it is a shame because what I think has effectively happened for minorities, and I'm a member of the Black community, so I'll speak about the Black community, but I won't speak for them, is that my impression is that Brexit made a lot of people a little bit nervous because they felt, oh gosh, we're on an island and we're going to be more vulnerable because of what potentially might come out of Brexit. But then all of a sudden we've had coronavirus and a pandemic where some of the misinformation that was being peddled was that coronavirus didn't affect minorities like any other group, which turned out to be nonsense. Then we heard that it couldn't survive in the heat, which also turned out to be nonsense. And now what we're hearing at the other end of all of that is that actually you're more likely to catch it if you're, if you're black or a minority, which is probably again making other people more nervous. Because I mean, look, put it this way: I was out, would have been around October, November time last year, and I was in Southeast London on my way to a kind of a training event, and I walked past a couple that both happened to be white. I was wearing a mask because I just thought, it's easy to wear the mask, but they walked to the other side of the road in order to avoid me. It was so blatant, it was unbelievable. They walked to the other side of the road to avoid me. And I remember thinking at the time, but you weren't even wearing a mask, so I should be more concerned about you than you should be of me, because I was wearing a mask.
Yeah.
But, this is kind of where we're at. I think, do you know what? I know everyone is annoyed with lockdown, and I know that people are itching for gyms and clubs and pubs and whatever to open again. But to be honest, if it meant that we could try and get things right, I'd be open to having another lockdown, as long as the aim was more than just an aim. It was like, right, we're going to do this, this, and this in this time frame.
Mm-hmm.
And to back that up, right, I was in an open prison, and one of the things we did, we had a little conversation amongst the prisoners, and we were concerned that the offender management unit, or the OMU, were not getting paperwork for each individual done in time for you to be boarded in order to go out on day release and home leave. So what we said as a group is, we said, look, if you are willing to get this right and you need time to be left alone to do that, we are willing to take the hit of sitting down on the camp for a month while you do what you need to do. Do you need that? And they were like, because I think that there was nervousness about whether they were actually going to make any improvement. But we were serious. We were just like, look, we are willing to do this, because if it's for the greater good, not in a hot fuzz kind of way, but if it's for the greater good, sometimes you've got to take a bit of a hit. You've got to make sacrifices. But I can understand why people are reluctant. I can understand it, because people are nervous. People feel, there are people out there. I've been involved in a charity with a friend of mine, Sasha, who has been running food larders for vulnerable members of the community, of all shapes, sizes, and colours. Just people that have expressed that, look, struggling, need some help, and they've applied to her via the app, and people have been donating what they can to the Cash app. And then what she's been doing together with me and 5 or 6 others is going out and delivering food parcels to people who are suffering in a time and a place when a country is in well, it's not a third world country, let's put it that way, but people are suffering and in having to literally say, yes please, can I have some food, because I'm struggling out here. And I just think that if there's not a conversation that needs to be had to change that, then I must be smoking something still. I really must be, because I just feel that there needs to be some root and branch change. There needs to be something radical, and it needs to happen now, because people really are suffering out there, seeing it every day. And very often I'm not even leaving the house, but I'm getting people that are calling me, people that are seeing the kind of interactions I'm having, like this one. I had one not too long ago where somebody had seen it and they rang me on Facebook. I didn't even know that you could do that. And when I heard the phone ringing, I was like, that's not my phone ringing. When I looked at it, I realized it was through the Facebook Messenger. This person had seen something that I'd said or done or whatever, and reached out, and I was just like, oh wow. So yeah, I don't know. One of my friends, he puts it this way, and it's the only way I can really kind of put it, and that is that we just got to each individually do what we can with what we got where we are. And right now I'm here, and I'm effectively in Kent. I live in the borough of Bromley. It's actually quite a nice borough, and I'm semi. I don't know. I mean, it feels kind of feels a little bit suburban, but I stay in as much as I can, and go out when I must.
Mm.
You know, and there's a pastor I know, that's his favorite saying. He says about Bible study, he'd say, come when you can, leave when you must. And that's exactly what I do with life at the moment, is I you know, I go where I can, when I can, and I leave when I must, or I stay in if I feel I need to. But there is a lot of suffering out there, and it's not, I would say, it's not exclusive to, you know, one particular group of people at all. I think it's just that, like, again, going to come back one last time to, you know, the whole addiction thing. It's just that until you find somebody who can relate to you, you feel like you're suffering on your own. And it's not the case. There are a lot of people that are suffering from the same thing, but unfortunately, because there is no organized kind of almost recovery around some of the stuff that we're suffering at the moment, nobody's finding one another. They're all, you know, everyone's doing isolated things to achieve the same goal. And to look at it from, you know, from the outside, well, is it the outside? I don't know. I mean, from looking at it, it just feels really bizarre to be able to see, as Barnum, I think, said, you know, to see that which is so obvious to be seen. And yet, here we are, still kind of in lockdown, effectively, wondering what if. And I said to somebody, and I kind of, you know, I'll leave you with this, if I can. Somebody said to me, there was two things that were said to me when I first sort of came home and the lockdown was in place. One, this person said to me, "Oh, you know, are you okay? Do you need anything? Are you okay with the whole lockdown thing?" And I said, "You know what? I'm absolutely fine. If prison gave me nothing, it gave me the ability to be patient around stuff, because, you know, sometimes things didn't happen. Sometimes you were banged up. Sometimes there's no regime. So, you know, you find the sense of patience in that respect. But the other thing that came up was what was it? It was around the whole. I lost my train of thought, but it was around the whole. What was it he said to me? I'm trying to remember how he put it. Yeah, and I can't even remember. I've lost my train of thought, but he was trying to. But what he said to me was something about, you know, the whole lockdown experience and stuff. That's right. That's what it was. So when we were talking, the same person just said to me, you know, so tell me about IPP. And I said, well, you know that you're in lockdown. You know that you can't kind of go out whenever you want, and you can't do this, you can't do that. You got to, you know, there's only so many reasons that you can actually go out of your house, and that, you know, if you kind of assemble in the wrong kind of numbers and stuff like that, you'll be arrested and all that kind of stuff. And he said, yeah. I said, yeah, that's IPP. I said, that's IPP. So, you know, effectively everything is, you know, really locked down in that sense. So, you know, coming out of an IPP into this is an extension of, rather than, you know, a massive change. So in that sense, I mean, again, don't feel bitter about it, because it's allowing me to work from home and just kind of get to know self. You know, giving me an opportunity to just kind of look at exactly the things that I'm talking about with you. You know, look at the things that work for me well, and the things that I need to kind of work on and improve and make better. So, you know, I'm not even talking about stuff that I'm not willing to do myself, because I am. You know. So, yeah, I mean, I'm doing all the stuff that I was doing in prison, really. I'm getting up when I need to, early, and getting starting the day. I am, you know, if I feel the need to, you know, if I've worked hard for the morning, if I feel the need to have a nap in the afternoon, like I used to do when I was in bang up, then that's what I do. But largely, I'm kind of getting up, and I'm at my desk by 7, and I'm stuck at it until at least 4 or 5. Sometimes so much so that I'm forgetting to eat, but I'm getting out of that habit, and that's what I mean about, you know, kind of seeing what works and what doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's important to get into a routine. I think now that we need to be focusing on, you know, and I'll finish with this because it is getting you know, I can see it is getting late, but you know, we need to focus on mental health.
Yeah.
Because it's now affecting so many people. You know, I do want to say that if there are people that are watching that are really struggling with mental health, that are, you know, that are struggling with sort of that darkness and really have no one to talk to, drop the page a message,
Yeah.
facebook.com / JW Greg, the accidental journalist, and I will try to help you speak to the right people.
Yeah. Awesome. Good stuff.
Because it's not easy. You know, I've had breakdown upon breakdown. Mental illness is a thing that is a big passion of mine, especially in men, because it's understood. It wasn't understood when I was a kid. It's still misunderstood now. There are still certain things around people telling you to man up, and you know, men should not cry, men should not show emotion, and this is all the lies that we need to be tackling.
Yeah.
I do want to do a Zoom, actual Zoom conference with a load of people, and talk about mental health. We've got a guy by the name of Steve Simmons that's going to come on and talk about mental health and suicide prevention. So yeah, I mean,
well, funnily enough, recently I was gifted a place on a mental health first aid program. So you know, I carry this little thing from the Mental Health First Aid England, which is, you know, about you know, the process of sort of recognizing certain things and how you can help people. But yeah, you know, I agree with you. It's, you know, it's really important, and it starts with us. You know, mental health starts with us individually. So yeah, completely with you on that.
brilliant. Thanks for coming on, mate. I'm going to wind up now, and then we'll have a quick chat afterwards.
Yeah, sure.
Thanks, guys, everybody, for tuning in. We've had quite a few people popping in and out tonight. I am aware that there were some technical difficulties that might have frozen a couple of times due to unstable connection. We do try to get through it as best we can. So yeah, a massive thank you for everybody that's come in. Massive thank you to my sponsors at Armour Scaffolding and No Mean City. So the next person on, unless we get any in between, because that some often happens, is the 2nd of March, and that's James Jeffries. And he has an absolutely amazing story. You know, and he's got a story of redemption as well. So yeah, I shall see you then. I shall go through comments and stuff like that as always. And yeah, we shall see you next time. Yeah, as always, thanks guys, and good night.